Good afternoon, or if you're watching from Russia or Europe, good evening. Welcome to this edition of the Scott Ritter Show. We live in a time of great turbulence, and one of the main issues that confronts us right now is what's going on in Germany. And the reason why I bring that up is we operate in a situation where Russia is currently involved in what many have called an existential struggle with the collective West. That's the United States and NATO. But as we speak, one of those NATO members, Germany, is dealing with the fact that critical energy infrastructure has been destroyed in an attack that can be described only as an act of economic and ecological terrorism. People claim they don't know who did it, but according to Seymour Hersh, one of the great investigative journalists, we know exactly who did it, the United States. And so I think I'd like to explore this issue a little bit more and some others, and there's nobody else I'd rather do this with than today's guest, Alexander Sosnovsky. He's an editor of a German-based magazine. He's an academic. He's an author. He's a pundit, and it's my pleasure to have him here today to discuss this and other issues. Thank you very much. Let me just start right off with Nord Stream. You live in Germany. You know the Germans. Why aren't they willing to call a spade and acknowledge that the United States is behind this horrific attack?
Good evening, dear Scott. I'm very happy to see you. You know, I've been dreaming to participate in your program. It's a great pleasure for me and privilege. The question about Germany is quite simple. To answer this question, why, we need to answer the question what Germany knew, what had happened there. And I have absolutely positive feeling that Germany couldn't but know that there was a preparation for the attack on the Nord Stream 2. According to all the data, and this data was published, we are quite aware that several weeks before this attack took place, there had been a tragedy where the head of Enterprise, dealing with the technical maintenance of the pipeline, died. Peter Griezmann. He faced a jet accident flying over the place when the attack took place. There is a version that he knew about a particular operation that was being prepared at that time against Nord Stream 2. And the accident, jet accident, when he died and his family died, whether it happened by accident or some third parties were involved. But I think, and ask a lot of questions, at least when he used his Cessna jet plane from Spain through France and Germany, he was accompanied by fighter jets, German fighter jets, till the spot not far from the Estonian coastline when the accident happened. That's the first question associated with what the Germans should answer when they ask a question, what happened to Nord Stream 2? The second point, I'd like to remind you that Germany is a traditional state which for many years had been tackling the preparation of deep seal or deep water seals. That's what they're called. This is not a tradition, but I'm going to compare that. There was a head of Abwehr in Hitler, Germany, and General Canaris, who had the whole area, together with the Italians, was being developed by them. Those were marine seals and divers which were able to conduct attacks like that. So I hope that the German Bundeswehr and the military fleet has enough specialists who could have conducted an operation like that, and which had to notice at least some kind of preparation stage for this attack. You know, to go, we see that there is some hundreds of C4 explosives couldn't be noticed by the German specialists in the electronic surveillance, in the surface surveillance. Germany keeps silence due to one simple reason. they have the ground and the reason not to be honest on this issue. Speaking Russian, I'm not sure how it's going to be translated in English, that, they should be kept silent because they are worried about something.
No, that's worried about what is the $1 million question. Now let's deal with Russia, because Russia was, at least a Russian company, Gazprom, was a majority shareholder in this enterprise. So when we speak of an attack against critical German energy infrastructure, this was also an attack against critical Russian energy infrastructure. What's your understanding of how Russia is approaching this? They seem to have taken a sort of a hands-off approach. They are starting to make some diplomatic noise, but until Seymour Hersh released his article, there wasn't much coming from Russia. Now Russia seems to be energized. Was Russia looking for a political opportunity presented by this article? Why has Russia been so hesitant to decisively engage on this attack against Russia?
That's a very serious question, since in fact Russia didn't take any measures, and it isn't taken any measures so far which would allow clarifying, but at least compensating for some damage. There is a single reason behind that. Even though there are some difficulties associated with the situation, huge economic losses, even though the 3 pipes of this pipeline has been destroyed. I believe that the Russian analysts assume that the launch of one pipe in Nord Stream 2 is still possible. Not today, maybe, not next year, maybe, but it is likely to happen in the near future. And Russia is conducting a kind of neutral policy when, from my perspective, Russian analysts assume that we shouldn't get it to the court issues, we shouldn't take legal measures, we shouldn't steer some water around that. What has been done. We need to be kind of tolerant, and then we may be using the deferred punishment rule. We can claim our damages any period of time. We can blame someone anytime, any period of time. From another perspective, there is a game of the special forces or intelligence, when one party says that we know who has done it, but when going to call by the name, and it is done for a single reason. No one wants to clarify and open, disclose their sources. When you give particular names and particular titles, you need to disclose your informers and sources. And, this kind of disclosure may lead to even greater losses compared with the pipeline itself. The second point, such a silent proof that we know, but we're not going to disclose that, sometimes even more dangerous and more serious rather than the direct confrontation. When you have called the name of your adversary, the adversary is ready, the adversary knows what to do, and then we'll be expecting some action. But when the other party, when we're talking about the martial art, for instance, when your opponent just imitates the kick, but the kick isn't done, so the opponent needs to think, is it an imitation, or is it a real kick, is it a real strike, or it's an attempt to somehow close your hidden motives. That's what Russia is doing. It's a very serious, very tricky game, but very clear to the counteragents of the US. I believe that the US clearly understands this kind of Russian position. The last complaint of Burns concerning Mr. Burns concerning his talk with Mr. Narishkin, when he said that the head of the Russian Special Forces, Russian intelligence, was very arrogant and was very acted in this way. That relates to the position concerning Nord Stream 2 expressed by Russia. They had meeting in Ankara, in Turkey. They had a talk when Mr. Narishkin characterized like a normal, calm talk, but the American party was unsatisfied and was concerned. We will not know the topic of their talk. This is kind of indirect proof of the Russian position when the Russia points, kind of focal points it is aware of. It just points at those who are to blame, but did not clarify the situation to the full extent. That's what it seems to me.
Thank you very much. I love the analogy of the imitated kick. I'm going to use that in the future. You are familiar with Germany, and you brought up something very interesting. There is one pipeline that was not permanently damaged, one pipeline that can be brought back into operation, and it appears that some Russian analysts believe that it will be brought back into operation in the near future. But to have that happen, Germany would have to dramatically change its posture. Is this part of the Russian approach to give Germany a chance to reconsider its position? And what do you think of what's going on right now in the Bundestag, where we have some members of parliament who are starting to make noise? And do you think they have a chance of gaining traction? And if so, what will the consequences be for the United States? What will the consequences be for NATO? What will the consequences be for the European Union? Because if the truth comes out, if Germany recognizes the horrible reality that they were attacked by their friend and ally, what does that mean for the future of the alliance?
I'm one of those analysts who says about Germany and believes that Germany has always a chance. I don't believe that Germany has been lost, and I don't believe that what is happening in Germany is for good. Of course, there are some healthy forces in Germany. Of course, they are suppressed in Germany, since in Germany there is the natural hunt for freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You cannot express your ideas fully and freely, and it is dangerous even by the law. But nevertheless, the Germans are like Russians. You know, it takes them for a long time to move, but then they speed up very fast. You know, the Germans are tolerant, and they will be tolerant for a long period of time, watching the situation. You know, it is a very important point when Russian goes outside to fight for the war, for the Germans to go outside. He needs to feel some losses in his own pocket and wallet. When he feels that, he will fight for the idea. That's the difference between the Russians and the Germans. So far, the Germany, because of the big accumulated reserves and resources, it tries to keep, or the population of Germany tries to keep the neutrality. But it is a very important point when it comes to the EU and what will happen to the EU if the truth goes on the surface. You know, in fact, today's situation in the European Union can be classified as a fight among some different clans. On the one hand, it is Germany, which doesn't want to lose its spot as a driver of the EU. On the other hand, there is Poland, which has tried to take the main dashboard of governing Europe by determining the rules. Let's fight, let's give ammunition, let's give military equipment. There is an old plan which was created in 1936 by Josef Pilsudski, which is called Intermarium. This is a plan which the Polish wanted to implement for a long time. This is kind of a development of a great Polish state from the Baltic to the Black Sea, which is happening right now. The Germans are aware of this plan. This plan implies, if it is implemented, that Germany will be cut off from the east, and it will turn into kind of a buffer zone between Poland, or a great Polish state, and the rest of the Europe. That's why Germany will do its utmost to put pressure on the Polish importance. It means that at the same time Germany will be against Anglo-Saxons, and it relates to Great Britain, since Britain and Poland are the same idea, some single entity. Germany will be trying to find kind of its own line between against these two states. It's going to be joined by France, undoubtedly, which has lost its importance over the recent period of time. And France doesn't want to become a partner of Germany, since they pretend to be a leader in Europe, but they don't have any other way out so far. It seems to me that today's segregation of the EU is happening in several axes. One axis is this intermarium plan, Eastern Europe from the Baltic to the Black Sea. I would include today's former USSR republics, Transnistria and Moldavia, where there is a threat of conflict against Ukraine as well. And on the other hand, there is the core of Europe. That's what the Chancellor of Germany called it: the France, Germany, Spain, and maybe Italy. And there is a third line, the third axis, which we haven't discussed, and it is existence. This is a former Austro-Hungarian empire. Austria is trying to create a kind of Central European Union inside the EU, which would like to include Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia. Of course, they would think about Italy, since there is a kind of a talk about the Catholic Union, and these three central driving forces. If there is ground that Germany knew who and how attacked, and nobody was told about that, it was hidden, those three driving forces would tear the EU apart. And in the near decade, we will see an absolutely different picture. There will be segregation of several states. The Hungary, I'm absolutely positive that Austria will be trying to create this kind of line, but we shouldn't rule out the situation that Poland in this situation will try to take the part of Ukraine, to annex a part of Ukraine and moving apart from the EU to the west, to the east.
I mean, what you're describing is a nightmare. Basically, at the end of unfortunately, we have dogs. At the end of the Second World War, the decision was made that Europe would freeze its borders so that we wouldn't have this sort of effort to create empire, a new Polish empire, a new Austro-Hungarian empire, and you're describing the end of that. And this would lurch Europe into a whole new level of confrontation based upon nationalism. And that's the next thing I want to bring up. Last September, you were on a program, and you took I think, a very principled stand when people started to talk about how they treated Ukraine and were talking about the Ukrainians and stuff. You said, "No, stop. We're talking about nationalism here, and we can't go down that path." And I applaud you for that stance. But where are we today? You just described a scenario where Poland is seeking to exert itself in this new nationalism. The resurgence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire would be new nationalism. And now we have Russia engaged in a conflict in Ukraine where both sides are starting to, well, Ukraine has definitely wrapped itself in the flag of nationalism, but now Russia is starting to articulate. We just had a terrorist attack on the Russian border that could be seen by many as inflaming the emotions of nationalism. What is the danger of nationalism today, both from a European perspective, but also from a Russian perspective? Do you view the growth of Russian nationalism as something that is a threat to not only Europe, but maybe Russia as well?
To be honest, I don't believe that there is a growth of nationalism in Russia. I believe that nationalism is a kind of invention which is in the blood of a person. When any state tries to take a stance of defending their national interests, it will move over the line which is not pleasant to us as just a human. This is a very vivid example is Germany, which in fact speaks about democracy, but in fact is getting back to the roots of nationalism. It seems to me that unfortunately we are over that line, we stepped over the line where there is a being back to normal. Back to normal, that those things which gave us kind of hope, your country kept on saying about democracy, about human rights, Germany kept on saying about democracy and human rights, Russia, the USSR talked about democracy and human rights. What do we see right now? Ukraine kept on saying about that. What do we see right now in Germany? And I'm a citizen of that country. Any political statements are almost banned. You know, for particular statements, I can be persecuted by law. If I want to say anything to support Russia, I can be punished for that. If I want to show Scott Ritter show in Germany, I will not be able to do that. This is Germany, which speaks about freedom of speech, freedom of expression. It has closed the YouTube channel. Of course, I'm an experienced journalist. I know how to get an access, but most people will not get this access to your show. And the mass of people who live under the conditions of this limited information, when it is just one-faced information. You know what this bad idea about that? When you read German newspapers, everything is given right. We are for the human rights, we are for democracy, we are for not violating minority rights. Everything is given in the right way, but it's talky-talk, but walk is different. When I ask my colleagues, when you talk about the violations and crimes of Russia, why don't you speak about the crimes of Ukraine, which has conducted those crimes since 2014? And they tell me they don't know. What crime are you talking about? Of course, they don't know anything about that, because the Russian information is closed for them. It is banned. I'm going to open classified information. You know, I have visited Vatican on business, and quite recently I met with high-profile officials in Vatican of the major Catholic forum in the world, and I talked with them and I had a debate with them over how the help should be provided to whom. They told me that we need to help Ukrainian child, and ask them a question. You know, the Pope invited the Ukrainian kids for rehabilitation, for the kids who faced some psychological problems, and they were invited for rehabilitation. But if you are talking about the democracy, about the religion, about the highest form of the human democracy, why did he invite only the Ukrainian kids? Why didn't he invite the kids from Donbass? You can invite the kids from Donbass and demonstrate that all the kids are equal to you. That's what the approach should be. Doesn't matter what side the kids are. You know, people are killed on both sides, and they couldn't answer my question. And they told me, you know, we cannot send our official to Donbass and to take a look at what is happening over there. And I asked why. You know, whenever we go there, we would be told that we can recognize these republics as part of Russia. That was a vicious circle. They don't want to know the truth. You know, the lack of desire to know the truth, that's what gives roots to nationalism in any country.
Oh, thank you for that. You know, just to bring up, you're a journalist, so I want to continue down this path. Recently, NBC, an American media outlet, sent a journalist to Crimea, crossed the bridge, and interviewed people in Crimea to try and get the ground truth from what the opinion is. The Ukrainian government responded by putting him on the Mirotvorets hit list, the kill list. I'm on that list, and I recently found out that on the Center for Countering Disinformation's list, which is put out by the president, I'm number one. I'm the number one threat to Ukraine because of programs such as this. So what we are doing right now apparently represents the highest threat to Ukraine from a propaganda or information warfare standpoint. Fair enough. You just talked about the situation in Germany and how there is suppression of of free speech. Here in the United States, while I can't say that there's laws that prevent one from speaking, I can say that the system does not support free speech, that some people have more access to outlets than others. You know, Russia is criticized as a nation that suppresses free speech. There is no freedom of the press in Russia, we're told. We're told that the Kremlin controls everything. You're somebody who is off and on, on Russian programs as a pundit. I've watched these programs, and I've seen heated debates. I've seen strong criticism of the Russian government, of Russian policies. But you're on the inside. What's your opinion? How would you rate Russia's freedom of speech with, say, Germany or the United States?
First of all, I'd like to congratulate myself, as I'm also on the sanction list of Ukraine, so I'm very close to you. We're on the same list. At the same time, probably not aware that I was born in Kiev. I'm almost Ukrainian. I lived there for 18 years. And then I joined the army. Ukraine is my homeland. You know, the difference is the following. Very often I come to Russia and I speak these things which I want to speak. And those who ask me questions, and different mass media ask me a lot of questions, I have never heard any kind of ban. We shouldn't talk on this topic, you shouldn't disclose this information, you cannot say this, you cannot say that. I cannot tell you that my statement was cut off the broadcast. And in Germany, in brief, I know that we ran out of time. In Germany, I've been living for a long period of time, and I was one of the members of the Foreign Policy American community, which is affiliated with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Germany. Last year, after long debate, they asked me to leave the community. They wanted to exclude me, but I left on my own. The reason is single, because I participated in Russian mass media and TV shows and TV programs. Right now, there is a fight between me and the union of the journalists, and I was one of the co-founders of these journalist unions, and now I'm blamed for speaking what I want to say in the Russian TV. I cannot say the same things in Germany. A day before the special military operation, a big German TV channel signed a contract for 10 programs, 10 TV shows concerning difficulties, and then the special military operation. You know, in the first TV interview, live, I said, how can you speak about the freedom of speech if you have sanctioned and banned anchors of TV channels, Samanyan, Solovyov, and they give me an opportunity to speak to the very end. In half an hour I got a call, you know, the contract has been cancelled. We don't want to talk to you anymore since you speak the things which are not quite pleasant to us. That's what the difference between the freedom of speech here and there. You know, I'm not very sad, but I'm very happy that I can participate in a show like yours.
Well, thank you very much. You know, we're going to continue here. I know we are under a little time pressure, but this is an important discussion that we're having. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you another question. And it's not just a question, but we're touching on some issues of fundamental importance, because freedom of speech is about communication, and communication is it's the tool that we use to solve problems. If we're not communicating, we can't solve problems. Right now, our governments aren't talking. You and I are talking. How can we improve communication? How would you do it if you were in my shoes or in other people's shoes here in the United States or anywhere? What would you do to improve communications between Americans and Russians? Do you view, I mean, and you don't have to say it to please me, but go ahead.
You know, I have a concrete answer to that. I'm against any ban on mass media, both in Russia and in the West. It should be open. Every person should have free access to any information. That's what I have been talking about, like that. There's nothing bad about that. People are too smart and intelligent to make their own conclusions, what is truth, what is not. For that, they need to have free access to information.
And what is your impression of Russia? Do people have free access to information in Russia, or has there been certain restrictions on certain internet channels, etc.?
In Russia, there is a freedom of information, but I have been criticizing Russia. But I'm against any Western messengers like Twitter, like Instagram, like Facebook. That will lead to nothing. Those who want get access to that. But this, there is a Russian saying that the forbidden fruit is very sweet. You shouldn't create idols out of the Western mass media. People should choose. It's just a waste of money and time. Free information will give more effect compared with the information which is closed. A small kid will be looking for something hidden by the parents. Journals with 18+ pictures, if he knows that it is hidden somewhere in the wardrobe. But if it is on the table and it can get free access to, so it will not provoke any willingness to take this fruit, like in the Bible, as we know from the history, that it shouldn't be the apple which should be given to a woman to give it present to a man. It shouldn't be forbidden fruit. Everyone should have access to the tree of knowledge and get this fruit.
Well, to build on your religious theme, from your lips to God's ears, freedom of speech, freedom of information, it's the most important thing, and I agree with you. And I want to thank you very much for taking time and coming on the show today. I found the conversation to be extraordinarily enlightening, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in and watched. Freedom of information. Think about it. I keep saying knowledge is power, but you can't have knowledge without the information. Thanks again for joining, and I'll